Hello everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel Best IT Solutions, and today we will discuss Spring MVC interview related questions. Okay, so this is also very important topic of Spring, that is Spring MVC, important module of Spring. So many more questions are also asking from this module also. So we will discuss one by one. So first, what is MVC? So MVC means the model view controller. So it is an architectural pattern that separates an application into main three logical components. So MVC is model view controller. So it is an architectural pattern. So the model view controller MVC is an architectural pattern that separates an application into main three logical components. That is model, and another is view, and another is controller. So MVC means model, view, and controller. And the next question is, what do you mean by Spring MVC framework? So the Spring MVC is one module in Spring framework. So the Spring framework is a big framework, and MVC is one of the module inside the Spring framework, which is built on the Servlet API. So the Spring MVC module is built on top of the Servlet API. It provides model view architectural pattern that can be used to develop flexible web applications using Spring framework. So it provides a model view architectural pattern that can be used to develop the flexible web applications using the Spring framework. Okay, and the next question is, what are the new features added in the Spring 5.0? So the Spring 5.0 is the first major release almost after 4 years of Spring framework, that is 4.0. So after releasing of Spring framework 4.0, the 5.0 is released after the 4 years. So it is the major release, and the changes in 5.0 are baseline upgrades, that is to build and run Spring 5 applications you will need minimum JDK 8 and Java EE 7. So this is the minimum requirement, that is JDK 8 we required and Java EE 7. And there are changes in baseline of many other frameworks like Hibernate 5 it will support, and Jackson 2.6, and EH cache of 2.10. It is second level cache. And there is JUnit 5 and Tiles 3 presentation technology also added in the Spring 5.0, and that is the Portlet, Velocity, Jasper reports, and XML beans, JDO, and Guava. So these are the things that is added in the Spring 5.0. What are the advantages of Spring MVC? So in Spring MVC implements a clear separation of concerns that allows us to develop and unit test our applications easily. So Spring MVC implements a clear separation of concerns that allows us to develop and unit test our applications easily. Spring MVC components are dispatcher servlet, controllers, viewResolvers, views, models, model and view, model and session attributes. So all these are the components are completely independent of each other, and they are responsible for one thing only. So these components like the controller and the dispatcher servlet, viewResolver, these models, these are the independent of each other, but they are responsible for one thing only. So this is the advantage of Spring MVC. Is Spring compatible with older version of Java? So to build and run Spring application, you will need minimum of JDK 8 and Java EE 7. Previous JDK and Java EE are not supported. So older version of Java before Java 8, these are not supported in Spring framework. What are the design patterns used by the Spring? So design patterns like singleton pattern, factory pattern, prototype pattern, adapter pattern, and the proxy pattern. So these are supported by the Spring. So singleton pattern like singleton scoped beans, that the scope of beans is singleton. Factory pattern, bean factory classes. Prototype patterns like prototype scoped beans, and adapter patterns like Spring Web and Spring MVC adapter pattern. Proxy pattern, Spring aspect oriented programming support, this is the proxy pattern. And template method pattern, that is JDBC template, Hibernate template, etc. And another pattern like front controller, Spring MVC dispatcher servlet. So the dispatcher servlet is also called as the front controller. So these are the patterns. And the data access object, that is Spring DAO support, data access object support. Model view controller, that is Spring MVC. So these are the design patterns used by the Spring framework. Explain the Spring MVC architecture. So these are the overall diagram of the Spring MVC architectures. Okay, so first the request comes to the dispatcher servlet, and dispatcher servlet will redirect the request with the help of the handler to the particular controller, and controller returns with the model and view, and then the viewResolver resolve the view name with and send the with model object, send it return to the servlet, dispatcher servlet, and then the dispatcher servlet return the response to the with the appropriate view to the user client. So explanation in this we can explain like descriptions MVC architecture, like the first is the client request is received by the dispatcher servlet. The dispatcher servlet sends the request to handler mapping, which provides the response in terms of controller class name. So the dispatcher servlet, with the help of the handler mapping, it will redirect the request to the appropriate controller. So now the request is sent to the controller from the dispatcher servlet. Hence the controller processes the request and returns the model and view objects as a response to dispatcher servlet. So the controller process, how it will process, if required it will communicate with the service layer, or it will also may communicate with the database layer, DB layer. So after processing the request, it will return the view object as a response to the dispatcher servlet. So it will return the model and view object. Controller return the model and view objects as a response to the dispatcher servlet. Now the dispatcher servlet sends the request to viewResolver to get the correct view page. So the dispatcher servlet, after receiving the response from the controller with model and the view objects, it will sends this to the viewResolver to resolve the view name to get the appropriate view page. Lastly, the dispatcher servlet sends the model object and the view name received from the viewResolver to the browser page to display the result. Okay, so finally, the view after getting the view page from the viewResolver, so with the view page and with the data, that is the model object, it will return to the browser to display the page. The @controller and the @request mapping are two main annotations that are used in the Spring MVC flow. So the @controller and @request mapping. So these are the two main annotations in this flow. So describe dispatcher servlet. So what is dispatcher servlet? So dispatcher servlet act as a front controller. So dispatcher servlet handles all the incoming HTTP request and response from the client. So dispatcher servlet acts as a front-end controller, that is, it handles all the incoming HTTP requests and response from the client. So whatever incoming requests are coming from the client, it will handle all these requests. Overall, it controls all the communications from the handler to the controller. So dispatcher servlet controls all the communications from the handler to the controller to view the resolver, to view the resolver to the actual view page. So to resolve the view and to get the view page, this will act as a very important role. So this is the overall dispatcher servlet diagram. You can see that. So this is the dispatcher servlet, and it from the top and side it receives the HTTP request, and first it will redirect one. In diagram 1, it will redirect to the, it is first transfer the request to the handler mapping, and then it will go to the controller with the help of handler mapping, then it will go to the viewResolver, and finally it will get the view and it returns the view to the client as a HTTP response. Okay, so this is the clear pictures of the dispatcher servlet. And what is the role of handler mapping? So the handler mapping is an interface that defines a mapping between request and handler object. So there is a handler object and the request. So it is the interface that defines a mapping between the request and handler object. So which handler is going to handle the request? So it is decided by the handler mapping. While Spring MVC framework provides some ready-made implementation, the interface can be implemented by developers to provide customized mapping strategy. This is the handler mapper. So handler mapper redirect the request to the particular handler. So what is the role of controller? The controller is responsible for controlling the flow of applications. When we make a request to MVC application, a controller is responsible to returning the response to that request. The controller can perform one or more actions. So the controller can perform multiple actions. So it will receive the incoming request and it is the responsibility of controller to send a response and a view page to the client or the end users. How to create controller in Spring MVC? So we can create controller using @controller annotations, and also we can use predefined controller classes provided by the Spring MVC to create controller, like simple fun controller or abstract controller. So these are the predefined classes provided by the Spring. So we can also create controller using these predefined classes. But generally we are creating controller with the help of @controller annotation. So in any class, if we mention that @controller, that means that class is now going to behave as a controller. And abstract command controller, multiple action controller, etc. So these are the simple form controller, abstract controller, sorry, abstract command controller, multi-action controller. So these are the controllers which are provided by the Spring MVC inbuilt controller. So what is context loader listener in Spring MVC? The context loader listener is a servlet listener that loads all the different configuration files. So the context loader listener is a servlet listener that loads all the different configuration files, service layer configuration, persistence layer configuration. So these are the configuration files. So it loads all the configuration files into single Spring application context. So all servlet listener, context loader listener is a servlet listener that loads all the different configuration files into a single Spring application context. So this helps to split Spring configurations across multiple XML files. So that helps to split the Spring configurations across the multiple XML files. So context loader listener creates the root application context and will be shared with child context created by all dispatcher servlet context. So the context loader listener creates the root application context and will be shared with child context created by all dispatcher servlet context. So what is viewResolver in Spring MVC? So viewResolver is an interface. So viewResolver generally it is an interface to be implemented by object that can resolve view names. So viewResolver is an interface. Generally it is interface, but it is implemented to resolve the view names. There are many ways by which we can resolve the view names. Most commonly used one implementation is by using internal research viewResolver. So we can resolve this view name by using this, implementing this internal research viewResolver class. It also helps to find the location of view with view name. It also helps to find the location of the view with the view name. So it resolves the view name also with the locations of the view. So we can create the objects on the viewResolver in this way, like that is bean class org.spring framework.web.service.view internal research viewResolver and property name equal to prefix and value equal to /web inf views. So these are the locations. These /web inf web informations. These are the private folders. So in this private folder we have created a views folder. Inside the views we have stored all our the view pages. So in this way, in our configuration files we can maintain the view name and as well as the locations of the view. So property name equal to suffix, value equal to JSP and bean. So this is also the suffix means the extension part also we can resolve from that this configuration file also. So what is @model attribute? So @model attribute, it binds a method parameter or a method return value to a named model attribute and then expose it to web view. So it binds the method return value, it binds the method parameter or a method return value. So it binds the method parameter or method return value to a named model attribute and then it exposes it to a web page. So if we use the annotations at the method level, it indicates that method is to add one or more model attributes. So if we use it as method level, so that means that method is returned is to add one or more model attributes. But if we use it as method arguments, it indicates that arguments should be retrieved from the model. When not present, we should first instantiate it and then add it to the model. Once present in the model, we should populate the arguments fields from all request parameters that have matching name. So the model attribute mainly it returns, binds the method parameters to the method return value to a named model attribute and the exposed to a web view. So it communicates the data from the front end and the back end. What is Spring Form Tag Library? So the Spring Form Tag Library, these are the tags are used to the configurable and reusable building blocks. So the Spring MVC form tags are the configurable and reusable building blocks for a web page. These tags provide JSP an easy way to develop, read and maintain. So these tags provide JSP an easy way to develop and read and maintain. So how to redirect request from one request method to another request method? So this is the code sample code by which we can redirect the request from one request to another request method, that is request mapping value equal to create user method equal to request method dot post. So the post method public string create user SSC model attribute user model are redirect attributes add flash attributes message account are created successfully. So this account created successfully string has added to the message and return redirect or create success. This is to add data to the attributes. We can access the value from flash attribute using model attributes. Okay, so we can through the help of model attribute we can also use retrieve this data. Okay, so in this way we can redirect request from one model attribute to another method. What is difference between model, model map and model and view? So model is an interface while model map is a class. So model is an interface but model map is a class and model and view is just a container. So model and view is just a container for both a model map and view objects. So this is just a container for both model map and view objects. So it allows a controller to return both as a single value. So the model map, model and view allows a controller to return both as a single value. So if we declare the return type as a model and view, so we can return both. We can return the model, that is the data, and also we can return the view name, both as a single object. Generally used model and view to return the model and view from the controller. So generally the model and view is used to return the view from the controller and also model and view from the controller. However, there is an option where you can just add values to model map and return view name from the controller method. So we can also do this through the help of model map, that is we can just add value to the model map and return view name from the controller method. Are model objects specific to a request? Yes. So these are the specific to a request. Model objects cannot be shared across request. So the model objects cannot shared across the request. So these are the specific to request. So to different request mean different model objects. Where should we place our static resources in a Spring MVC application. So static resources like the HTML file and the CSS file, so and the image. So where we can store it. So answer, we will keep it in all static data under resource folder. So under resource folder we can keep all our static data. Can I have multiple parameters with the same name in a request? Yes, it is possible. Shown in the below code. So here we can pass the multiple parameters like login name equal to some name and name equal to Ravi and name equal to Satish. So this we are passing here the 3 name at a time. This is a multiple parameter. We can accept all values using an array in controller method. So when we are passing in this, there is multiple value in controller. We should declare an array to receive this multiple value. Like public string method, there is a request param. In request param, value equal to name and string, and it is a name. This is an array. So we should declare an array of strings, and in that array of strings variable, we can pass all that 3, 4, or 5 names. Okay, so the next question is, can you explain the concept of interceptors in Spring MVC? So interceptor is used if we want to apply some special functionality before the request handled by the request handler. So if we want to execute some conditions before execute the actual handler, so at that time we can use the interceptor. So in Spring MVC we can achieve this by using handler interceptor interface. There is in Spring MVC there is a handler interceptor interface. So to implement that handler interceptor interface, we can achieve this facility. So interceptor, what is interceptor? Interceptor is used if we want to apply some special functionality before the request handled by the request handler. So before the request handled by the request handler, if we want to achieve some special functionality, then we can use that interceptor. 3 methods provided by this achieving this, like pre-handler is called before the actual handler is executed, post-handler is called after the handler is executed, and after completion is called after the complete request is finished. So 3 methods are provided by this handler. How to schedule a task in Spring Web application? That is the job schedule. So we can do this by scheduled annotations, like just overlook on that sample code, like scheduled and fixed delay equal to 5000 milliseconds. That is, it will schedule for the delay time of 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, that job will be continue executing. So public voids do something, and it will execute periodically after 5 seconds. The next question is, what is character encoding filter in Spring MVC? So the character encoding filter can be used to set encoding format. So the character encoding filter can be used to set the encoding format. It is used to do some pre-processing. So this character encoding filter is used to do some pre-processing. So in the sample code, like this filter name equal to encoding filter, and filter class, inside the filter class we are Spring framework.web.filter character encoding filter, and in our the initial parameter we are passing like parameter name encoding, parameter value UTF-8. So filter mapping close, filter name, filter encoding filter, filter name, URL pattern. So in this way we can create a character encoding filter. How do you enable Spring security for a web application? So Spring security is used to implement authentication and authorization for web application. Okay. So Spring security is used to implement the authentication authorization features for a web application. So we can enable Spring security by configuration an appropriate security filter. We can create a separate security context XML to define the authentication and authorization roles and access. So in this way, this is the sample code. We can use this Spring security in Spring MVC project. Can we return response from controller method directly? We can do a response body annotation for that. So if we want to return directly response instead of returning view, so we can use the response body annotations, because the REST controller equal to controllers for the response body. What is the difference between the request body and the response body? So the request body annotation maps the HTTP request body to a transfer or domain object, enabling automatic deserializations of the inbound HTTP request body onto a Java object. So the request body annotation maps the HTTP request body to a transfer or domain object, enabling automatic deserialization of the inbound HTTP request body onto a Java object. What is the response body? The response body annotation tells a controller that the object returned is automatically serialized into JSON and passed back into the HTTP response object. For example, that put my mail equal to update user public response body user update user response body user upload. So return user. Okay. So this is the difference between this response body and the request body. What is response entity? So we use response entity when we want to customize the response status. So if we want to customize the response status, so at that time we can use the response entity. In all other situations we use the response body. So every situation we use the response body, but if we want to customize the response, then we want the response entity. So our get mapping value equal resource. So these are the mapping and public response body resource. Say hello return resource. First one will resource and public response entity create resource and return response entity dot created resource dot build. Okay. And how to read query parameter in Spring controller? That is the URL query. So to do this, we should use request param annotation. So to read the query parameter, we should use HTTP colon localhost Spring MVC app get book. So here we are query parameter is the get book and the book ID equal to 101. So here book ID is the query parameter. So if we want to access this book ID query parameter, we should use the request param inside our method argument, that is request param, that is book ID. Now we can access that book ID and the book ID will be copied to the string book ID. So with the help of the request param annotation we can access that the query parameter. How to read path parameter in Spring controller? So there is annotation like path variable annotation used to read the path parameter. For example, so here the path parameter is 101. Here 101 is the path parameter and the get mapping like value get book ID, that in path parameter comes to that ID, and now the path parameter is received by the path variable ID and it will copy to the string book ID, and we can use that book ID path parameter here. How to handle exception in Spring MVC? So to handle exceptions, there are many annotations are provided by the Spring, that is exception handler, and also there is annotation like controller advised to make that class etc. like. So handler exception resolver class also there. By using this annotation we can handle the exception in Spring MVC. How to prevent double posting problem in Spring MVC? So to prevent double posting problem, duplication from form submission, there is one form submitting more than one time, so we can post redirect get design pattern in Spring MVC application. So if we use redirect get design pattern in Spring MVC application, then we can solve this problem. What is REST template in Spring MVC? So to use REST services or resources in our web application, we can use REST controller instead of the controller annotation system. And to access API, we can use REST template or web client classes. So to access the API, we can use the REST template or web client classes. So through the help of the REST template, we can communicate between the services, REST template or web client. So REST template is used to create application that consumes RESTful APIs. We can use the exchange method to consume the web services for all HTTP methods. It provides below methods: get for entity, get for objects, post for entity, post for objects, put, etc. are the methods provided by the REST template. What is the use of web client and web test client? So web client is an interface representing the main entry point for performing web request. So web client is a interface representing the main entry point for performing web request. It has been created as a part of the Spring Web reactive module and will be replacing the classic RestTemplate in this scenario. The new client is a reactive non-blocking solution that works over HTTP 1.1 protocol. Finally, the interface is a single implementation, the default web client class which will be working with it. So web test client is used to test web client class. So the difference is web test client is used to test the web client class and web client is used to communicate with the services. Tell few annotation that used in Spring REST development. So in Spring REST application development, we are using annotation at the REST controller, at the request body, at the response body, at the get mapping, at the post mapping, at the put mapping, at the delete mapping, at the request param, at the path variable. So like many more annotations we are using. Can we develop Spring MVC application without XML? Yes, we can develop. So web.xml file will replace by the web initializer.java and dispatcher.servlet configuration XML file will replace by the web config.java. So this and root app config XML file will convert to the root app config.java. So all the XML file will converting to the Java file. So this is called Java with configurations, Spring MVC applications. How to get servlet context and servlet config object in Spring Bean. So to use these objects, we need to implement servlet context aware and servlet config aware interfaces and override below methods. So we can do like that: public class simple controller implement servlet context aware, and at time also implement the servlet config aware, and with the help of the servlet config or servlet config aware interfaces, we can get the servlet context and servlet config objects here. Just follow this code and you can get these things. How to use Tomcat JNDI data source in Spring Web application. So we need to configure it in the Spring Bean configuration file and then inject it to the Spring Beans as dependencies. Then we can use it with JDBC template to perform database operations. Okay, so in this way we can inject these beans, that is origin.springframework.jndi object factory bean. So now we can use this JNDI data source. Property name equal to JNDI name, value equal to java.com and emb JDBC MySQL. This is the URL. What is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? So Spring is one of the most widely used Java EE frameworks. So Spring is one of the most widely used Java EE frameworks for building applications. For the Java platform, the Spring framework provides an elaborate programming and configurable model. It aims to simplify the Java EE development and helps to developers to be more productive at work. It can be used at any kind of development platform. It takes into account the rising needs to today's business and strives to fulfill them. So these are the Spring frameworks. Unlike other frameworks, Spring framework focuses on several areas of an application and provides a wide range of features. One of the major features of Spring framework is the dependency injection. So Spring framework supports for dependency injection. It helps make things simpler by allowing us to develop loosely coupled applications. While the Spring framework focuses on providing flexibility to you, Spring Boot aims to shorten the code length and provide with you easiest way to develop a web application. So with annotations, configuration and default code, Spring Boot shortens the time involved in developing an application. Okay. So it helps to develop the Spring Boot. Spring Boot helps to develop the automatic the auto configurations features of the project. So we can easily configure a project. So this auto configuration feature available on this Spring Boot. So these are the difference between the Spring and Spring Boot. So main difference is the Spring and Spring Boot. The Spring Boot provides auto configuration features. So now we can focus more on the developing part instead of the focusing on the configuration part. But most of the configurations are done by the Spring Boot framework. Okay. Okay, thank you guys. This much in this video. And if you think that you have learned something from this video, you can like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you.